The question is, do you agree that Scotland should be an independent country?
For me, the principle that we work best when we work together.
Well, they didn't.
Very serious. The referendum. It seems to me that they're not dealing with the issues.
And I've heard other ones saying, I definitely won't get any vote because they knew me at school. Well, forget that when you're voting.
Margo's got the quality, Margo's got the style.
Why do you feel, as a politician or someone interested in politics, that you've got to cover up the fact that you're interested in sex?
I don't think that's the case at all.
Sort of busy today, but I wanted to speak to you about tolls and polls. On the tolls front, I'm going to vote with the Greens. I'm rather hoping... Peter, can you get me a copy of today's amendments, the Greens amendment?
My office goes like a fair. As an independent, I think lots of people are more comfortable working with me. I'm extremely interested in PE, physical activity and sport, and I can probably claim fairly to have had some influence on the executive's thinking and new approach to PE in schools.
I don't know where you're going to sit down, but just move my hat. Hiya, how are you doing?
I want to help enhance the Scottish Parliament's reputation home and abroad. I'd like to build a greater awareness of Scotland's identity and abilities. Therefore, Paddy places students with us, students from America who want to intern with us. That's a way of plugging Holyrood and Scotland into the big wide world. And in 20 years' time, Paddy's interns could be running companies and maybe even states in America.
And it's not a complete role, but it's a role that nobody else was playing. I think you should put all of your literature out to everybody, and because the environmental protection measures that we need to take don't observe boundaries, and they don't observe political boundaries, so therefore make sure everybody knows what the score is, and make them feel guilty and make them feel a responsibility and it doesn't really matter whether they're a wimp, which is what I call Westminster MPs, WMPs or MPs, that's us. And because we are smaller and more manoeuvrable, we can quite often work a lot faster.
One genuinely good feature of Holyrood is its accessibility. I certainly appreciate the chance to talk straight and listen face to face with the groups who visit Parliament. I've accompanied a number of them who've presented petitions to the Petitions Committee, people who were suffering from long-term conditions or wheelchair users. The group I'm speaking to here are from the environmental lobby, obviously, and that's something that's really crept up the political agenda. I'm no expert and I'm still learning, but I suppose you could put me down for a play safe until all of the big debates about our carbon footprints have been resolved. But just for the moment anyway, I'm certainly trying to do my best to watch my carbon footprint.
Good morning, is that Joanne? It's Margo MacDonald here. It's to ask if I could possibly get a constituency question today.
And of course, there's the chamber. That's where we talk about things. That's where some people yell at each other about things. It's where I make guest appearances and I try to make the very best of them. Because sometimes that's where you have to say it for the record or to get things done. It's where I try to call the executive to account. And if I think the executive has got things right, then I'll say so. Because I'm an independent and I can say what suits me, what accords with my priorities, and what I think my electors would want me to say. Being an MSP isn't so much a job as a way of life. Whether it's working lunches, which are exactly what they say, because that's where I'll discuss perhaps chairing a women in alcohol conference. Notice the big glass of water in front of me. But also buzzing about the town, you bump into great people, like the Reverend Alan MacDonald, who is the present moderator of the Church of Scotland. He and I agree totally on the obscenity of nuclear weapons and want to see a cancellation of Trident.
Having had a very high political profile, and when I was trying to get work, when I was out of politics. It was very, very difficult. People they only saw the politician. It was like a disability. People only seen the wheelchair. They assumed that you couldn't do anything else.
Just like every other politician these days, I have my own focus group. It doubles as a hairdresser's. But that's where I meet people face to face on their terms in their territory. Sometimes I can pick up things that can help avoid trouble. Sometimes it's simply a case of giving information and advice as and when people need it. I'm interested in education and skills training, and I try to help students directly wherever possible. So I hope that I'm helping this photography student fill her course portfolio. Also, it gives me the chance to talk directly to the principal of Stevenson College, Susan Bird, about the English language courses that are on offer for Polish workers coming here, for example. I've been talking to lecturers and teachers and students about the possibility of sports coaching and dance students, perhaps helping out in schools until we have enough PE teachers trained to meet the government's targets of 2 hours PE a week. Margo MacDonald, Mistress of all trades, representing Lothians in the Scottish Parliament. In Parliament most days there are media interviews, radio, television and newspapers. I've just had my hair done, so of course this is a radio interview, but it is about one of the issues close to my heart. Now, there already is a programme running in Edinburgh called Transition. It's an excellent programme. I've visited it myself, and that takes young people who previously perhaps had no hope in making much of their lives and helps them.
Be very gentle, Margo, don't worry. Can we give a huge round of applause? There we go.
But it's not all frivolity and fun being an MSP. The Stand Comedy Club might not appear an obvious venue at which to meet the people, but there are people in the audience and I want to meet them, so why not?
Is that a full stop?
This has been just a glimpse of the sort of things I do and the way I operate as an independent in the Parliament. But there's plenty more. Dennis Healy. Some of you may have read this in my column, for which I offer you apologies. Dennis Healy, 40 years ago, decades ago, Tommy, that I was elected to Westminster. And one lunchtime I was sitting with Barbara Castle, because she and I sat opposite each other and pretended we were having lunch with each other. Actually we weren't, but it kept people away. But Dennis approached, tray in hand, and said, "Right, young woman, I've been looking for you and put you through your paces." And he did. For the next half hour, it was like a university oral exam. At the end of it, and I have never forgotten, I know his exact words were, "Excellent, watertight." Did you read the 3 Banks review of October? Well, I hadn't, of course, but... And he said, "But of course I shall oppose you every inch of the way." And he has told us in an interview with Holyrood magazine, if you haven't got it, you should get it. He's told us how we were cheated and lied to, misinformed, all quite deliberately, over what we could have expected from oil. Don't let it happen again. Now you know why it is I'm mixed with the Greens in Holyrood. Very nice people, want to nationalise everything. Great. No, quite seriously, I'm part of it's not exactly a group, it's a sort of group, so that we get access to the business round in the Parliament. And there are 2 Greens in it and 3 independents. And I tell you, I think I'm more green than anything. Can you be green and have a dishwasher though?
My wife says yes.
Right, down to business. I'm not sure just how many of you are in tonight because we really
think that we should not have sovereignty in Scotland, that Parliament should not be a Southern Parliament. I don't know, but I hope by the time you leave, you're at least thinking about it and wondering why you describe yourself as Scots when you're not willing to take the responsibility for sustaining the Scottish nation. And it doesn't matter, incidentally, where you came from or what colour you are or anything like it. He's Scots, I'm Scots, you're Scots. If you decide to leave, that's a different matter. But so long as you stay, and your heart's here, and your roots are here, and you're working, and you have family here, you're Scots. That's all there is to it. Don't have any more angst over it. But I'm going to get confessions out of the way first. I think I was the person who introduced the term social union. Around about, it was an article I wrote for the Times, the London Times, that is, 76 or 77. And I had a clear idea of what I meant by social union. The sort of union amongst people that would continue no matter what political construct we decided on. Because at that time, it seemed independence was almost a dream. The best we could hope for was a Scottish Parliament for control over Scottish affairs, as they called them. And of course that didn't include anything that had to do with people beyond these shores. That was for big boys, that wasn't for us. However, at that time, visualising independence, I said that so much would change, but I thought that the social union would remain. Now, what I was really talking about, and it took me till quite a few years afterwards to realise exactly what it was. My sister lived in Yorkshire and brought up her family in Yorkshire. My daughter was in Dublin. She was working in Dublin for 4 years. I felt no closer to my sister because she and I were in the same state than I did to my daughter when she and I lived in different states. And there was no barriers between us. There was a social union, a social communion, if you like. So I wish I'd made it clearer when I did, because since then all sorts of people have tried to explain the good intentions for maintaining what has been good about the social approach to life that has been built up across all of the British Islands. And I think there's been a bit of a guddle resulted. I think people are a bit confused now. And I hear Alex Salmon criticised for saying, we'll have such and such a thing, and that'll just be like the current way of running things. I think he's been far too open, to be quite honest, because I don't think he's done enough preparatory work to say to people, this is what we mean by total sovereignty, this is where you might think about sharing sovereignty. And you might think about sharing sovereignty when it came to defending not just Scotland, not just England, but the whole group of offshore islands. We have, when you think about it, we have very much a common attitude towards maintaining the sort of social conditions and social attitudes that have taken maybe 200 odd years to build up here, and we don't want to lose them. We think they're worthwhile holding on to. And I think that there's nothing wrong with wanting to hold on to the sort of attitudes that we have built up over that time, in conjunction with people who lived in other parts of the United Kingdom. But I don't think it's been explained very well. So I think that has made some people think, do we need independence? What do we need independence for? Well, you need independence for the reason that the councillor explained. If you're going to take full responsibility, if you're going to do things from the ground up, then you need independence. It's not devolution. Devolution is power retained. And the power is retained in Westminster. That means that priorities are set in Westminster, whether you like it or not. There's obviously a priority set in Westminster as regards how we defend ourselves, because there's nuclear weapons still there, even though I'm quite convinced a majority of Scots now would want to see the back of nukes. And to be absolutely frank, I think if the Scots took the lead, I think most English people would start saying, why do we need these nukes? I mean, if they only knew the truth of them. Do you know that I interviewed the American ambassador once? Reagan's ambassador, forget his name, something the third or fourth. Anyway, not quite seriously. He was one of the guys who bankrolled Reagan when he was going for the presidency. And in the course of the interview, I mentioned the British nuclear deterrent. And he said, peanuts. And I said, pardon? And he said, peanuts. Whereupon the two gentlemen, sort of underarm stuff, holsters that is, sitting in the corner of the room, got very agitated and came trying to get my tape off me. And they didn't get it off me, but I had to go undergo quite a bit of pressure, because that was what the Americans thought of the British deterrent. It's never been a deterrent, not to anything. I mean, if we wanted to declare nuclear war on somebody, we need to pick somebody our own size, like Malta maybe. So we're kidding ourselves and we're paying all that money. How stupid. And I think that if we got shot of it, if we said on the attainment of independence, we know you can't get it out next Tuesday, but we'd like to see an end of it by, and you fix a date in negotiation. Now we can do that, but we will need to do it for ourselves. Nobody else is going to do that. And you know that, whether you know, yes, undecided, or absolutely convinced that we're all bonkers. No, we're not bonkers, because all we'd be doing is trying to do what Singapore has done, what Norway has done, what Finland has done, and that is grow much, much bigger in our own shoes, because that's what we can do. We've got the basic tools there. For goodness sake, on the day that Graham Bell is announced to be the best scientist ever in the United Kingdom's history, and the day that we have 5 universities in the top 200 in the world, okay, they're not the top, because Princeton and so on, with all the oodles of money that they've got, they take the top places. But more than any other country in the world, we've got a university represented. Now, we should not do ourselves down. It wasn't luck that happened. It meant that there was something, that there was some root there that has been growing for a long time, and we are benefiting from it. And so therefore, we could, I think, do as Singapore and the others have done that I mentioned. We could grow much bigger, because we would test ourselves, we'd take a wee bit of a risk that we don't take just now. And many folk who are undecided are worried about the risk. Worried about the risk of having £1 trillion debt to pay. That is the sure thing if you stay with Britain. Worried about the risk of your children having to go to food banks. That's what you get if you stay with Britain, and inside the British economy, allowing you the space to develop that it does at present. Now, some folk don't like to be reminded of it, but if that is the case, what's so good about being British if you're only thinking of that? If you have a deep, genuine, emotional attachment to the idea of Britishness, perfectly all right, that's up to you. I don't share it with you. My idea of being British is, as I said, shared values, shared experience and all the rest of it. I don't feel it in my soul. Now, some folk might feel their Britishness in their soul, and that's all right, and for goodness sake, don't be ashamed of it. But don't do down people who feel Scottish in just the same way by telling them that they couldn't possibly do any better than they do just now in terms of creating the fairer society, the better society that all of us up here want to, are determined to do if we get the chance. Why should we fail?
We have a point of order from Ms MacDonald.
Presiding Officer, I would be most grateful if you would look at the beginning exchanges of this session and compare them to what the stated aim is for this part of the working day. This is supposed to be for the questioning of the executive by backbenchers, and so much time is being taken by ritualistic abuse from the front benches that there's no chance to get backbench questions in. You did your best today and you went to 5 minutes over the time. This is no criticism of the Chair. It is a criticism, though, of how we are allowing this session to stray far too far from the original intention.
0500 92 95 00. Let's speak to the independent MSP Margo MacDonald, who's called us supporter of independence, of course. But what about Calman?
It's the economy, stupid.
Now, Calman was about individual taxation, and that's fine, that's great. It's all for moving more accountability and responsibility to the Scottish Parliament. But I think what the Scots want is a better performing economy that provides jobs for everyone who wants a job in Scotland. I think the economy is the overriding consideration, and the taxation that Calman proposes to shift to Scotland is not the sort you need to get the economy going.
Well, it could be if we lowered taxes in this country. Many would argue we could attract businesses to Scotland.
I doubt it very much. You can attract businesses only in that way. You've got to have corporation tax at your disposal. You've got to have all the planning regulations tying in with taxation and so on. And the people who have been on to say that really, why don't you just make it independent? They're the sensible ones, because that's what this exercise of Calman has shown, that you've got to go very artificial again in order to maintain the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom arguably may have done a grand job at the start of the 18th century in allowing Scots access to the burgeoning English Empire, but we're into the 21st century.
But isn't it clear that the majority of the Scottish public don't want independence?
Well, I think the majority of the Scottish public would like to have a good life for themselves and their family here in Scotland, and they don't give really too much attention or too much angst is lavished on whether or not it's going to be a constitutional arrangement called independence or federation or confederation or devolution. They just want a better life for themselves and their family here in Scotland. And I would argue that we know what being the fag end of the British state has brought to Scotland, which is we're always running at the coos tail as regards economic development and employment. Now, why do we continue to want to do that? We won't break the social ties that we've got across the border. We want to. But we should have an economic management that is tailored to our condition and our economic construct, because it's very, very different now from England's.
But are these plans better than nothing? I mean, if this, if you could vote on these plans, would you say yes to them?
I'll vote on them, perhaps. And if it's an improvement, of course I'll vote yes if it's an improvement. But why are we setting our sights so low? Why aren't we going for broke just now? For goodness sake, the financial management and the economic management of Scotland's resources by London has been shown to be less than perfect. In fact, it's just awful. Surely we wouldn't do it worse ourselves.
Why are you so sure that you'll be asked your opinions on this? Isn't this a matter for the Westminster Parliament?
But we'll have a vote on it, I'm sure we will. We'll have a debate, because we're supposed to articulate what the Scots are thinking. And certainly I will be sticking to what I believe to be the truth, that the Scots want to have the good life for themselves and their families here in Scotland, and it's up to us to find out the way of delivering it using, constitutional means to get the sort of parliament and the sort of powers we need. I mean, I want a new cooperation amongst all the islands of the British Isles and Ireland. Somebody was talking about, the need to look after borders and so on. Well, as an offshore island group in Europe, we've got a common interest amongst all the islands, but it has to be based on the equality of the different parts.
Okay. Margo, thank you very much indeed.
You first of all decide what it is you would like to do through the Scottish Parliament. Once you've decided what you'd like to do, you decide where you get the money from. And believe you me, you cannot tackle poverty, you cannot tackle the inequalities we've got in Scotland if you leave defence and if you leave foreign affairs and the economy with London. And that always seems to be the case. Because if you do, you'll be spending the money you should be spending on old people. You'll be spending it in Trident. You'll be spending it in great big aircraft carriers. So there's fundamental decisions to be made. But first of all, decide what you want to do from a Scottish basis. Then you'll say what the requisite powers needed are.
Thanks for that.
And only then you have a referendum.
Right.
My is great to be alive and in Scotland and in Edinburgh, the capital of the best free country in the world. Now I say that not as a boast, I'm just reminding you that one of Alex's predecessors spent a fortune getting a PR company come up with that slogan. But actually it was the best small country in the world. We ditched it because it was too much of a boast then, and it'll still be too much of a boast until we make Scotland the best wee country in the world. You know, it's great to be on the side of the angels just for once. Now that is not to infer anything at all about the folk who aren't here, who are our fellow Scots, because I love them just the same, with exceptions. But just remember, the day after the independence vote, whether it's win, lose or draw, they're still our fellow Scots. They're still our fellow Scots. Yeah. And we'll still have to work alongside them, and we'll have to rebuild alongside them.
Yes!
You see, I get to be nice about everybody. So I'm just asking everyone here, think about this. Alex talked about the numbers of people who support independence, and the PA is even now reporting that people in the march have said that they've changed their mind in the last year. If a third of Scots believe in independence and want independence now, every one of us has got 2 years to persuade another one Scot, and then we're home and dry. Now that's not fanciful, that is just practical. I'm very practical, as you know. And it would be, for me, an honour to be able to stand here in a couple of years' time, if I'm invited back, that is, and say, well, I'll tell you who it was I persuaded, because there's a number of candidates I've got in mind. See that Mr. Darling?
No chance.
Oh, don't boo him.
No, boo him.
There's always room for sinners to repent. I think you would mock the afflicted, so I'm not going to. But we can laugh about it and enjoy it, because life goes on. And you should remember that when you're persuading your one person that you've selected as victim. Talk to them in their ground, stand where they're standing, see it from where they see it. What is it that I'm worried about? That we couldn't possibly pay the high unemployment rate that they pay. Have you ever heard anything like it? You can't be independent because you want to still be getting unemployment benefit from us. That's a signal of failure. That's an admission on the part of the government that they haven't got it right. And instead of putting up with this tosh about you couldn't possibly leave the embrace of Mother England or Greater Britain or Bitter Britain, whatever it's called. Instead of putting up with that, tell them they've got a brass neck expecting you to commit your children and their children to a steadily diminishing state. Not a crashing failure, but steadily diminishing all the same. And when they're asking you about the defence policy, incidentally the SNP were daft to talk about defence policy. I'll tell you why after. But when they say that you couldn't possibly have a defence policy, do you know that they've got to hire in Nimrods to do the reconnaissance of our fleet, fishing fleet and fishing grounds and oil reservoirs just now? Do you know that? They haven't even got the planes to do it themselves. And they send soldiers and they send men to foreign parts to fight wars that are very dubious and in some cases definitely illegal. And they've got the nerve to send said it was daft for the SNP to say, oh, here's the policy. Don't forget, when you're talking to that one person, that after the independence rally, after the independence vote rather has been won, then the party politics come back into play, and we don't know who will be the party in power. So therefore, we don't know exactly what the policy will be. We can find out what the principle is beforehand, but you don't know all the fine details. So, oh, you're absolutely right, with no to NATO. Now, there might be some people in here today who disagree with us, but it's not a deal breaker if you think that we should stay in NATO, because there'll be plenty of room to decide after independence exactly what will be taken. And although I'm very pleased to see some flags from Europe that I recognise from 30 years ago from similar marches, I don't think there's only one way to be part of Europe. And I think that Scots should be made aware of it, that there'll be a choice to make. We don't need to be in the EU, and we certainly don't need to be in the Euro. This is where the organisers wonder if they were wise to invite me. However, I am an independent. I'm here to encourage other people that this referendum is not about parties. It's about every single Scot. It's about you and me and this one down here that wants to stay in NATO or something. I'll put up with you, brother, if you put up with me. But it's our referendum. It will be our independence decision to make. I sincerely hope that Scotland finds the courage to do what Scotland really wants. And I believe that in my heart of hearts. Because even the folk who are opposite us in Parliament just now, picking up wee itsy bitsy points, dancing on them, trying to inflame them, to make them a big argument against independence. A lot of them have doubts too. Don't forget that when you're talking to them. They're in a party, and they've got their party politics at the moment mixed up with what should be entirely personal and should be principled rather than party political.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm glad to hear that some of these ideas on containing drink are taking root. However, I've said my piece. I'm so happy to have been here today. I'm very, very proud to have been here. And you're meant to leave when you're still ahead. Thank you. About choice. Now, the one thing I've got to say right from the very start, since I'm associated in some measure with this bill on assisted suicide, as we now call it, my position is that there is not a choice between ending your life in that way, seeking assistance to end your life for whatever reason, and palliative care. The one can slip into the other, and should, and I would hope it would, but there's no choice to be made, as far as I'm concerned, between the two. And right from the very start, I've got to say that. The language used is very important. As you yourself said, you hesitated over euthanasia. I think that in United Kingdom English, euthanasia is something that is done by person A to person B. Assisted suicide or assisted dying is person A asking assistance from person B, and it can only be in that way. The initiative cannot be taken by person B. And so it's very simple, but it gets us, I think, into the right parameters. One of the other things that was said was that there are different, it wasn't spelt out, but there's clear implication. There are different cultural groups in our society, and of course there are, and that there would be different responses All I can say is anecdotally, because I don't have figures to prove it, although I have lots and lots, hundreds of communications from members of the public, there appears to be roughly the same sort of percentage of people in any society like our own, a westernised liberal society. There appears to be roughly the same sort of percentage who would say, I approve of that in principle, in being able to determine for yourself when you die if you want to miss the very end of life because it is intolerable to you. And it appears to be, because I've had lots of people, come to me and tell me privately, you'd be surprised because there was churchmen of all denomination, people from the mosque as well, which in some ways pleased me because there was no difference. They were exactly the same in what they said to me, that their personal and private belief system, if you like, allowed for this, even though the leaders of the churches may preach against it. In lots of respects, the churches are probably the only institutions that I would think it proper to have a policy. I don't think the government should have a policy, because the government's made up, as is the civil service, of a range of people, a range of individuals, and each has a private morality which does not offend against, I think anyway, public good if at the end of life they make this choice that I'm suggesting. And everybody's got their own opinion on it. Politicians, civil servants, doctors, everyone. There are people who will argue something else, but that's what I argue. And I would expect the churches probably to be the only institution who should have a policy. Now, what's the proposal? The proposal is that if people who are in full capacity and have a terminal or irrecoverable condition come near to the end of their life, find it intolerable, and ask for help to end it. Now, this can start way back from the time when the decision has to be taken, because you know early on what your attitude is, and it would be a good idea, we think, and this is going to be in the new bill, to register almost with your GP, to go along and say, this is the type of thing that I would want to happen if I find myself in this position. So there is a record of it. The reason for that is actually to allay the fears of the disabled lobbies and the elderly lobbies who said, but we feel vulnerable because there's a recognition that death could be assisted legally. We feel vulnerable. And it was to emphasise once again, it's only the person concerned. And if you tell your doctor when you're in fine fettle, yes, if it gets to the bit. Now, all of us, me included, I've got no intention of dying. They'll have to take me out and shoot me. But if it got to the bit, I'd want to know that I had the insurance policy. And it maybe helps other people relax if they feel that there is this added safeguard. So that's, first of all, early notification. At the end of life, or approaching the end of life, if you've decided it's just too bad, like Tony Nicholson, you will remember that case, the locked-in syndrome. I cannot envisage any reason for that man being forced to stay alive, because that was what it was. I don't know who gained from that. I can't believe that as a society we gained. And certainly as an individual, he was tortured and did not have the quiet, dignified death amongst his family that he might well have achieved if assisted suicide had been available. They say that hard cases make bad law. No, I don't think they do. If you work out what you do fairly and equitably with the hardest of cases, I think you could end up with quite good law. I'm sorry if I'm getting very croaky. But the other aspect of our legislation, which people seem to like, is the clear-cut pathway. Thank you. Thanks very much. I'm not normally this. I must have been talking too much. People have told us, because I have spoken in various places now on it, and Peter Warren, who's my assistant, and he's absolutely fantastic on this. He's worked very closely with me, and he was down in London this week at quite a high-flowing meeting, and the English people were there with, what did they call theirs, Jean? Can you remember? No, the one that Charlie Faulkner's heading up in the Lords. Dignity in Dying, but they have a name for their proposal, and I'm really sorry, I've just forgotten what it is. It's different from ours, and I think there was quite a lot of people who were looking on and just wondering, should they stick with what they're going with, which is, it's an attempt to make things easier for people in that dreadful position at the end of life, but it wouldn't have helped Tony Nicholson, it wouldn't have helped Diane Petty, it wouldn't have helped all of the cases that have come to light in England. Now, why have they not come to light in Scotland? Because we're just better at getting by these things quietly. But we've passed that stage, we can't do it like that now. There's going to be more people realise that they can expect to exercise this right, and it's not a medical problem. I don't believe so anyway. I believe it's a problem of justice and the observance of individual rights, individual human rights. And more people are becoming aware of this, and so therefore I think this has to be faced quite squarely. And people like the fact that we've said that here is the clear pathway, examination by 2 doctors. If you're found to be in a situation where you're suffering from conditions or illnesses that are treatable, they have to be treated first. And if you have them treated and then ask a second time, as you must go through the same application procedure, 2 people saying that they're not going to benefit from your will, and they know that this is your choice, 2 doctors agreeing. And incidentally, we've acknowledged the fact that GPs are now making judgments on capacity, much more so than they maybe did previously because of the new legislation. And so it doesn't have to be 2 psychiatrists, but we would imagine that the guidance that would be handed down to doctors would be, you'll give an opinion as a GP. If you're doubtful, you would seek specialist backup. That's what I would expect anyway. But that, you don't write that into legislation. That's where the professions take responsibility for how the law is applied as best it might in their case. There also has to be a report to the procurator, and so therefore there's another check there to make sure that everything has been done properly. We think, I mean, you never ever get perfect legislation, but we think we've got quite close to it this time, and the bill can be expected before summer. I would like to make sure that it doesn't become entangled with the referendum, because, I mean, you say, how could it possibly? Things get very tangled up when you've got a referendum. I've been through it in 1979, when all sorts of other considerations crowded out the clear yes-no answer that had to be given. And in some cases, this would be the same. So I hope we manage to keep clear of the referendum, but that's something that's out of my hands.
If you're traveling to the North Country Fair, where the winds hit heavy on the borderline, remember me to one who lives there, for she once was.
Now, Brian, there was a wee important point jumped off Annabelle's contribution there, and that is she talked about defence. As Wendy Alexander once said, bring it on. There's 29,000 people now in the British Navy. The admirals say they cannot afford to have this aircraft carrier that will never sail anywhere because Britain, Great Britain, stronger together, remember, can't afford to put any planes on it.
Okay,
so they wouldn't want to build that in the Clyde. They could build vessels that we need here.
Come gather round, you people, you women and you men. Once more our backs are to the wall, we're being attacked again. Which side are you on? 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 We've fought a million battles to defend our hard-won rights. We're going...
Actually, I'm as sweet as Diane. But when you were talking about spies there, Stephen's story, he and I were, well, he was walking, I was running behind him, as usual, up the mound or something from one meeting to another. And I don't know why, I remember why it was we were talking about spies. Both of us had visits at that time in the 70s from people who came from both sides of the divide. And you used to get great big guys coming in with wee tape recorders and saying, "I'm Ivan, do you mind?" "Oh no, I don't mind at all." "Oh, NATO, you know, what's that? Refreshment memory." And we would also have somebody coming from the other side. And I remember saying to Stephen, "We'll need spies as well. Where do we get that?" "How do you set about getting spies?" He said, "Well, I don't think, Margo, but we would advertise in the Edinburgh Evening." Such was my relationship with Stephen. But it's really great to see so many lefties here tonight. It meant that, what do we call him, Blair? He failed. We're still all alive and standing. I wish Stephen was with us because he deserves more than anybody else to see what's going to unfold as he contributed at least as much as any other side of the person. No more, because you did see that he was one of the driving intellects in the SNP. I think he was probably the only one. Well, I shouldn't say that because this is she too could count up to 20 without taking her socks and shoes off. There's a dividing line sometimes up there. But can I thank the people who invited me here this evening to be here, because I'm so proud to be associated in any way with Stephen Maxwell, from whom I learned so much. He was very different from me, with different backgrounds and all the rest of it, and yet we were very similar. And I don't think Stephen and I ever fell out. Did he ever fall out with anybody? I don't think he did. I think he was far too much of a gentleman for that, and I loved that about him. And I loved the fact that I could learn from him. I did learn from him. And one of the things I learned was that it was possible to practice the black arts and still be humane and decent with it. And so I owe Stephen Maxwell a great deal. And when I thought about what I was going to say tonight, I thought, well, I'll tell you about the time the pair of us went to Barcelona. And business, of course, because we're always just pals. But it looked then as though Scotland would lead the race to establish the new parliaments for the submerged nations. And the Catalans, the Basques, the Walloons, the Flemings, all of them looked to Scotland to lead the race. And it's a bit of a disgrace that we fell so far behind. But Stephen and I went anyway to meet Jordi Pujol and the CDC folk.
and the people who were likely to be involved in forming a government and parliament in Catalonia. And we had a fantastic time. It was absolutely wonderful. We learned, soaking it up. And of course, he was so clever, he got in a lot more than me. But I knew where the good shops were. Because in that time I was coming back to go to the shops. And I'll tell you the story that not many people know. Isabel might remember this. When we came back, proud of the fact that we had Jordi Pujol and the deputy leader of the Parti Québécois to come to Bannockburn that year. And then they came to Bannockburn and the executive walked off the platform. So Stephen and I were left with these very distinguished men. So Bannockburn passed and it came the time you had to pay the tickets, the plane tickets. You can go and whistle for these. So Stephen and I did have our differences with the SNP executive, culminating in the expulsion of the 79 group. I'll tell you the laugh about the 79 group, not many people know this either. The one that they really wanted to expel was my husband. And he was the only one that wasn't in the committee. So Stephen was party to all of this. And he was very, very patient with those of us who didn't have the same intellectual grasp of things as he had. And I'll tell you something about the development of the two nationalisms, the existentialist and the utilitarian one. It wasn't that one overtook the other, it joined the other. Existentialism came first and then it was joined, and that's the case today. And if you actually listen and look at what's happening in the approach to the referendum, we're going to need both strains if we're going to have a yes vote. You'll need the folk who feel it in their waters and the folk who have worked out that it's the better way to produce a fairer Scotland and produce public policies that we can be proud of. You need both. And I'm absolutely certain that we're seeing both develop, and people shouldn't be ashamed of being in either camp or in neither camp or in both. I certainly feel myself to be in both. But then some of them thought I wasn't a nationalist. However, I am a nationalist. I'm a lefty. It's great to see all the lefties emerging again. I wrote a piece in tonight's paper and I talk about sensible socialism. That's the watchword, sensible socialism. I'm sure it'll come into its own now. And can I say that this book that Stephen Maxwell has left us is going to help us achieve the sort of Scotland that I want to see and the thing we want to see. Thank you.
There once was a musical troupe, a pickin' singing folk group. They sang the mountain ballads and the folk songs of our land. They were long on musical ability, folks thought they would go far, but political incompatibility led to their downfall. Well, the one on the right was on the left, and the one in the middle was on the right, and the one on the left was in the middle, and the guy in the rear was a Methodist.
She's an icon!
I'll try some. See you, Elaine. She exaggerates just a tad, as you will probably find out. However, last year when I said to everybody, there should convert one person, make one friend for independence, and we'll be there. Some of you have been gay promiscuous, I think. But I'm pleased with that. It's absolutely fantastic that there should be a turnout like this, because the polls say you're dead. And Ian Davidson, much more importantly, you know Ian Davidson? Such a nice fella too. He says you're dead in the water as well. I think the turnout today belies the polls. I've got this theory about Scots now, when they are polled, They're just polite to whoever asks them. However, this is absolutely fantastic. And you know something? I think it probably shows that people can be influenced to change if you put the right arguments, if you don't dwell on the past, if you look forward and so on. And I had a good example of that this week. I had written, and I was speaking about risk-taking. Risk-taking. Well, we're supposed to do that when you've got the confidence that should come from independence, because we'd be a crowd of dummies if we weren't much more confident and sure of ourselves and measuring ourselves taller than the world if we gain our independence. So confidence comes. You take a bit more of a risk. Entrepreneurialism should flourish. And I was speaking and talking about this, and you know, I didn't think it was going to have as quick an effect, and I didn't think it would be the sort of person that responded to it. Guess who said what he said? Guess who said that we should think about nationalising back the postal services? Alex Salmond. Now, Alex Salmond is on a winner. I hope he looks at the railways next. I know it gave John Swinney a bit of a black hole or something to fill, but he'll get over it. And I suppose when he mentions the railways, smelling salts for John Swinney. But that's the sort of vision that we should be holding out in front of the Scots. If we think that's the right thing to do, if it's right to keep water in public ownership, if it's right to have postal services in public ownership, if it's right to have the railway in public ownership, then we say it. We don't do it in a week, we don't do it perhaps in a year, but that's what it is we're aiming for, which is a bit better than what we've got just now, which is terribly safe stuff from the Labour Party. The Labour Party was supposed to be the party of the people that held out the vision, and maybe it did once upon a time, and even though I'm older than Elaine C. Smith, I can't actually remember when the Labour Party did that. I remember when Jimmy Reid held out a vision and people followed him. But I don't want to do down the parties too much. I'm just saying to the Labour Party, you're as varied as the SNP is in its membership. There are as many opinions in Labour as there is in the SNP. There's even folk that don't agree with the Labour Party leadership. Mind you, they're no good at saying it. And those of us who said it in the SNP sometimes regretted it. Anyway, I think that the one other thing that I said last year that I'd want to repeat again, because there's a bitterness creeping into things. Just remember that we're all Scots. We have to work together no matter the way it turns out. And if it's 50% plus one, whoops. We're told, labelled their project and their campaign the Fear Project. Now, I think that in itself is really horrible for the people who thought like that. But on the other hand, it puts the fear of life or death in me when I think that they might win. That means that it's okay to have our 220,000 children in Scotland living in poverty. That means that it's okay to think about handing on a debt to our children and grandchildren of more than £1 trillion. And when we hear all this baloney, that there's a wee bit improvement in the economy, don't forget they've borrowed to get that improvement. That's got to be paid for. That's more of debt. And the British currency has lost its AAA rating. We're fooling ourselves if we think we can afford to wait. We're going to do nobody any harm by becoming independent. And we can do all the folk in Scotland who have been done out of a good life, we can do them a world of good by becoming independent. It's obvious from the turnout, it's obvious from what I say here today, that I believe that yes is possible. I just think the folk who are writing off yes because of what opinion polls say
are just wrong. Now, why do I think they're wrong? Just imagine what you'll be like in the day afterwards if you say no. Just imagine the way Scots would feel. And just imagine what other folk would feel about the Scots. That we were all mouth and no kilts. We would not carry respect. We would not respect ourselves. And that would be reflected in the activity in the country. So therefore it's unthinkable that it should be no. And just imagine them trying to have a party the day after. A no party. Who would come? The plan is that we come here the day after to celebrate and bring a friend. Please excuse me, I'm going to see Hibs win another glorious triumph.
My heart was broken. My heart was broken. Sorrow, 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 sorrow. My heart was broken. My heart was broken. You saw it. You claimed it, you touched it, you saved it. My tears are drying, my tears are drying. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. My tears are drying. My tears are drying. Your beauty and kindness made tears clear my blindness. While I'm worth my room on this earth, I will be. Sunshine on Leith, I'll thank him for his work in your birth and my birth. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You touched it, you saved it.